So we today are going to be learning about one component of Onward Hebrew, which is Jewish life vocabulary. Jewish life vocabulary we have defined as a collection of Hebrew words or phrases that increases one's connection to the Jewish people, traditions, culture, and Jewish life. Chances are you already regularly use Jewish life vocabulary in your everyday speech, things like Mazel Tov, Hidurim, or Tefillah. But our three educators today are going to talk about how they very intentionally went on a journey this year of increasing the Jewish vocabulary in their communities, as well as identifying a very specific set of words that they wanted to focus on learning this year in their community. So today we're going to hear from Ashley, Julia, and Randee. And then at the end, we will have time for questions and some conversation and on the Onward Hebrew website that we are happy to share with you. So I am going to turn it over to Ashley.
Well, hi everyone. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I'm going to start with talking a little bit about like the culture of Hebrew in my school in general, because I think that really helps frame the conversation for why we brought Jewish life vocabulary in and the like specific way that we introduced it to our community. I know it says on the opening slide, but I work at Stephen Wise Temple in Los Angeles. So, I think at our school and like a lot of schools, there's a huge emphasis on Hebrew, specifically with B'nai Mitzvah preparation. And both of these things are really like a driving force of both registration and participation in our school. And I think something that's somewhat unique to Los Angeles, although I could be wrong, but it's definitely true at our school, is that a lot of our students are in private school. And when they come to religious school, their parents want them held to similar levels of rigor and similar challenges academically during religious school as they are during their regular school week. And then another part of our culture that feeds into the Hebrew culture is that a large Shabbat dinner with close to 50 to 100 people is a really big part of the culture for a lot of our students, and parents really expect that their children will be able to lead blessings for the family and for their community at these meals. And I think adding to that, aside from the Shabbat blessings, prayer fluency is really our parents' top concern when it comes to Hebrew. And I wanted to share all of this background because when introducing Jewish life vocabulary, given the demands and expectations of the community, it was really important to introduce the initiative. And by the way, this was the same framing we used for Hebrew Through Movement, that this was not a change to our Hebrew program, but a tool that we were embedding within our Hebrew program that was going to add to their children's success within the Hebrew program. So our message to families really when we were introducing it is that we value and prioritize Hebrew education, and that this closely curated list of words that I'll get to choosing the words in a second, but that the closely curated list of words and phrases are going to help their children, help our students learn the Hebrew vocabulary necessary as a 20th century American Jew, and that is one of many tools that we offer their children to be successful. So I want to speak a little bit now about choosing the words. I'm going to share my PowerPoint of our list of first semester words. We were really able to benefit from other schools that have already started this work, and that was a really helpful tool to me in choosing our words. So in terms of choosing the words, some of them, this is our list of first semester. I'll go to the second semester in a minute. But some of them, were a really obvious fit, given that our first Sunday this year was between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Choosing Shana Tova as our first Jewish life vocabulary was a really natural fit. Similarly, going to the end of the semester, our last day of religious school, Not only do we celebrate the learning of our 6th grade students with a celebration for them, but because it is our chance to say see you later until next year, or see you later until you come for youth group, Lahitra Oat was a really natural fit there. So I started making my own list I had a blank chart of all of the dates, and then I left a column for holidays, and I said, okay, this word is this Sunday school, we're gonna be celebrating this holiday, you know, this one we're going to be celebrating this holidays, what words or what Jewish life vocabulary are gonna be a natural fit based on the appropriate holidays and where we are in the Jewish calendar. And then other Jewish life vocabulary kind of got plugged in a little bit later, where there were more natural gaps, you know, words like, phrases like Boker Tov, Yom Huladet Sameach, those aren't tied to a specific time in our Jewish calendar. So those were a little bit more evergreen. And to me, it was not important, and I believe it is not important in Jewish life vocabulary to go in the order of the Aleph Bet, but to me it was important to teach the words and phrases when they were natural and relevant in our Jewish year. So now I'm going to jump a little bit to how we communicated. I already spoke a little bit about how I communicated this to the parents, but I'm going to touch a little bit on how we communicate these each week, and a little bit also on how we communicated them to our teachers. So at teacher orientation, when we introduced the initiative that we are starting this year, all of our staff, they received a copy of the list for the year, and their copy, unlike this one I'm showing you, also had the holidays that matched the Jewish life vocabulary, and they also had a column of songs that either contain a lot of words with the letter for that week, or contain the phrase if that was appropriate, as well as other words that were in the letter. They also got, they're also every week in our staff email that I send, I remind them what the letter is as well. And on our board in our office where they come in and get their coffee and bagel, I write it there as well. So I make it really hard for them to miss what the letter is. And then externally, we use a variety of different tools to inform our families what our letter is that week and our Jewish life vocabulary. So I'm going to jump now to the visuals. So each week we communicate it in our both in our newsletter that just our religious school families get, as well as in the weekly email that goes out to the entire congregation. So for the visuals, I'm using this ones we used yesterday, where our Jewish life vocabulary was Purim Sameach. So this is the visual that went in our newsletter as well as in the congregational newsletter. And then every Sunday, we also print it on posters at the front of our school. So if you look on the left side, you can see the letter printed in print and script, and some different words that begin with that letter, and then our schedules in the middle, and then on the right side is the Jewish life vocabulary for that week. And I put them really close to the curb so that hopefully parents that are driving through might see them as they're going by, and if you're walking in with your children for the day, I often see families walking up and looking at them as well. And then all of our words for the semester are also printed on a bulletin board outside of our office. And I tried to do it in an interactive way. So the word, again, I'm using Purim from yesterday. The word is printed on the front, and it's kind of like a guessing game. It's printed on the front. And then on the inside has a translation of what the phrase is. And I think my favorite thing about the bulletin board is that we share space with the day school, and I take a lot of pride when I see kids from the day school going up and flipping over the cards. And then also when we first began Jewish life vocabulary, I presented it during our parent orientation, and I also wrote a bulletin article for our temple newsletter.
Thank you, Ashley. So I want to go back and highlight a couple of the things that Ashley mentioned. So Jewish life vocabulary is part of an overall philosophy of sound to print, that our kids should be hearing Hebrew before they are trying to tackle decoding Hebrew. So you see that Ashley is choosing a list of words that her whole school uses, whether or not kids have learned to decode. And then at the same time, she's also choosing a letter of the week that goes with the words. In Ashley's case, they don't necessarily go in the order of Aleph Bet, but it helps her parents, as she talked about, that have an expectation that they're learning these letters in the same way that they might recall from preschool a letter of the week. So she's sharing the letter. You saw on the poster, the letter was in both block and script, with several different examples of words that start with that letter, as well as the word that everybody's using, which we really appreciate. Ashley also talked about how she chose the word of the week, that sometimes it tied into holidays and sometimes it was a general list. And someone asked about an all-school list. Most of the congregations that I'm familiar with do have an all-school list, because the idea is that everybody together is working on these words and developing them. And I see that Julie posed another question about the same words next year. And I think Ashley can answer that on the chat, but I think different communities are deciding about using the same words or rotating words to increase knowledge. You also saw on her initial list. Oh, you want to add something?
So I just want to add one thing that I think is really important in the communication is I also made it really clear, given the culture I shared of my school, I made it really clear that this list was chosen as a team, that I went to my clergy partners and said, here's the words, here's why I think these are a good fit. And then when we communicated the initiative, we made it really clear that this was a congregation-wide endeavor, and I think that's really important. So I just wanted to add that.
And then the last thing is just that you saw, at least in the internal list, that there is a use of transliteration, that in many settings, both the Hebrew and the transliteration appear in different places to enable as many members of the community to be part of the Jewish learning and part of the Hebrew learning. This Jewish life vocabulary is really about infusing Hebrew into your setting in as many places as possible. And that's what Onward Hebrew is all about changing up the traditional ways and being very thoughtful about how we introduce Hebrew and how we expand Hebrew for the 21st century learner. So we are going to now turn to Julia. And Julia is going to share a little bit about how she onboarded her teachers to Jewish life vocabulary and some of her successes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I want to talk a little bit about our background as well, because it's interesting to note that our school is really different from Ashley's school. And I think it just goes to illustrate that, that this can really be successful at any kind of school. So we're a Temple Ramat in Northridge. We're in the suburbs of Los Angeles. And we are like a small to medium-sized conservative synagogue. And we have just under 100 kids in the religious school. And we decided to start doing Jewish life vocabulary. Really, it's been a really interesting process. So through Reshet-LA, we were working on kind of a visioning process. And the parents who for 3 or 4 years had been demanding from our school really academic learning and school that really looked like school, started to talk to me about really the reason that they were sending their kids to religious school and being a part of the temple was for community. And we did a lot of talking about how those two ideas come into conflict with each other. And they really encouraged me to think of it as being interconnected, and that when they understand the Hebrew that's being used in the synagogue, that they really feel more connected to the community. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing. And when I started learning about the Jewish life vocabulary, it felt so natural with that here we could provide our students and the parents and the congregation with the language to feel like they were part of the in crowd at synagogue, that they knew what was going on, and that was such a crucial part of being a part of the community. So I really thought about how to bring this to my teachers. And And I made it a really big part of our teacher orientation over the summer. And we did 3 kind of different activities with it. So the first one, and I also wanted to make it sort of fun. I didn't want this to be a really serious and heavy part of the curriculum. But I also didn't want my teachers just to be standing in front of the classroom saying, this is the Hebrew word of the week, repeat after me, and this is what it means. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more memorable than that and a little bit more fun. So with my teachers at our orientation meeting, we played a game to start us thinking about how hard it can be to help to remember to use the Hebrew words and phrases in the classroom, right? We get into our teaching and it is so hard not to just go into our natural English. So what I did was I gave each teacher a list of words in Hebrew and English, Hebrew and transliteration and translation. And they weren't necessarily the Jewish life vocabulary words, but they were words that might come up in this teacher meeting. And I gave each of them 3 paper clips. And the game was that if somebody used the English for one of those words on the list, you could take their paper clip. And we were going to see who got the most paper clips. And I was the first one to lose my paper clips, which was kind of a bonding moment for us. But it was a really fun way just to get us starting to think about when we're using English and when we're using Hebrew and how we can sort of play with those ideas. The second thing we did was to go over the Jewish vocabulary list for the year. And this was where we got some pushback and some challenges. My staff is a mix of native English speakers and native Hebrew speakers. We have, I want to say like 3 native Hebrew speakers and 5 native English speakers. And so there were a lot of talk going through this list about the typos that I'd made in the Hebrew. We talked a lot about pronunciation. The Jewish Life Vocabulary website does have pronunciation videos on it. And the big battle that we fought in this meeting was about the word labriut and labriut versus livriut. I have one teacher who was really passionate that the correct grammar is livriut and that she didn't want to teach her students anything that was not the correct grammar. And we had a long discussion about this with the other native Hebrew speakers and with all of us. And basically the compromise that we ended up coming to was that she could teach that the correct grammar was livriut, but that she would also tell her students that most people today say labriut. So we sort of came to that compromise. That was really the one word that we had some challenges with. And then the third thing that we did was we worked on how to introduce the words in a creative way. So I had each of the teachers make a list of supplies in their supply closet that start with the same letter as their first name. And then they got together in pairs and they each chose one of the Jewish life vocabulary words and had to come up with a way to introduce it using those supplies as in their introduction. And it was just to push them out of their comfort zones a little bit and get them thinking about how they could use props and things that they have in their classrooms, and to be a little silly with it. And that was really fun. And I found that these activities also really helped us bond as a staff, that we really came together in a really nice way. And I would say that the teachers have really taken this on and run with it. Each of them is doing something a little bit different. I have one teacher who every week puts the word in Hebrew and English and transliteration on her whiteboard, and it sort of stays there as a reminder each week. I have another teacher who has her students illustrate the word every week to get those picture memories in their heads. Another teacher sends the word home each week with a strip of stickers, and the students can give them to anyone they hear using the word. And I should mention that we have also made this a synagogue-wide initiative. So the words are shared in my weekly email to teachers, my weekly email to the parents, our temple-wide weekly email that goes out, and they're also on our video screens in our lobbies. And a great little piece of fun is that I just had a parent tell me that she has 3 children, and they have an ongoing competition at their house to see who can use the word of the week the most times that week, which I thought was just really fun and something that they brought in all by themselves. So looking back on the year, I think it's been really successful. Parents are telling me that they're seeing it, they're excited about it. And the thing I really want to focus on next year is continuing to use the words in the classroom when even past that week. I think it's easy to get caught up in this is the word of the week and we're sort of only going to use it this week. And I really want to focus on keeping it going in the classroom. So I think I might be playing the paperclip game at every staff meeting. We might be bringing the students into the game. I'm not sure exactly, but that's definitely going to be our focus for next year.
Thank you so much, Julia. Some of the things that I want to highlight from what Julia shared, first of all, was her staff buy-in. Whether it is pronunciation or which word, making sure that you have that buy-in with your staff and with your clergy is all really important. And that both synagogues shared that this is a community-wide effort. One of the things about the Onward Hebrew conversation is we want Hebrew learning to be fun and accessible, and it's not just for kids. And to be able to infuse this Hebrew learning to the kids, to the parents, and to the broader synagogue community, whether it's the bulletin board outside, whether it's the electronic board when people walk in, it really sends a message that we're learning Hebrew in Hebrew school, if you still call it Hebrew school, or chances are if you don't, somebody in your community does, and to really share off that pride. Something that is a big piece of Onward Hebrew is having fun with Hebrew. For those of you that participate in the Hebrew Through Movement program, this is a key element of the curriculum. It shouldn't be drill and kill. It really should be about smiling and laughing and being silly. And I loved how Julia shared some examples of that and really starting that with your staff, and that trickles down to the kids. We all, or I assume many of us have memories of learning a language in school and not having that really positive feeling. This fall, we did a survey of congregations using Onward Hebrew. That information is all on our website. But a big piece of the information we gleaned from the survey and part of our initial discussions when we came together as a leadership team was the change in attitude around learning Hebrew and how important that was for us, and how we've really seen that in the congregations that are using the different elements of Onward Hebrew. So thank you for really raising up the emotional component, which is a really big piece. People in our communities want to speak Hebrew, they want to learn Hebrew, and this is a great way to make it accessible. So now I'm going to turn it over to Randee, and Randee's going to talk a little bit more about how we engage parents as well as how we partner with clergy, because we know that both of those things are really crucial to the success of this endeavor.
I am at Temple Akiba in Culver City. And just to give you kind of an idea, Jewish Life Vocabulary is one part of our Hebrew program. We jumped full-fledged into Onward Hebrew this year. And so we're kind of doing everything. And so Onward Hebrew has a lot of different components. And Jewish Life Vocabulary is one piece of that puzzle for us. And so really we're trying to change the culture of Hebrew in our school and in our synagogue. And so what that really looks like for us is, making Hebrew really a part of everything that we do. And Jewish Life Vocabulary is a piece of that. And so it's a step in the direction for us of the kids hearing as much Hebrew as possible. So they hear it in Hebrew Through Movement. They hear it in the Jewish Life Vocabulary, they hear it in Tefillah, and so by the time we've delayed decoding as part of this Onward Hebrew process, by the time they get to that delayed decoding, they've had, this years of oral language exposure that then the decoding will become easier for them. And so, like Ashley and Julia talked about, we made our list of words and the same as they did, in relation to our synagogue and what makes sense for us. There are a lot of resources on the Onward Hebrew website that can help you make your list of words. There's tons of just ideas and lists, and if you want to use foods or holidays or like word choices, there's lots and lots of resources there for whatever fits for your synagogue culture. So it's a really great place to start. And then like Julia talked about, really working with the teachers to bring it to life in the classroom. Our goal is to make it fun. It really is. It's a like 5 to 10 minute part of our day. It's not a big lesson. in every classroom. And it's just introducing the word, introducing the letter, a lot, and it's supposed to be fun. Like some of the younger grades, they do it in clay or Play-Doh or paint or shaving cream or whatever. The Madrakim have come into the act, and one of the classes, they make a skit every week, a silly little skit that tells the little story of the letters or the words or whatever it is. It's supposed to be fun, so the kids have access to the word and they're hearing it, and that's it. It's like a little joyful moment of hearing the letters and the words, and then we move on. It's not meant to be a big learning thing where they're being tested on it or anything like that. It's supposed to be happy and positive, because one of our goals with this Onward Hebrew, what we're doing is to have a positive connection to Hebrew language, and that's really what we're focusing on and trying to do. And so what I really want to talk about, that's kind of background on what we're doing, is how we communicate what we're doing, so that the parents know about it and can kind of continue the learning at home. And similar to what Ashley showed you, we have a bulletin board that we have every week at the bottom of our stairs where you walk into religious school that has the letter of the day and the words of the week, and we change it every week at right smack in the face at the bottom of the stairs. And so as you walk into school, you can see letter of the day, word of the week. And so when the parents and kids are coming to school, they really stop and look at the board. And the kids are excited to see what is the letter today, what are the words today, and the parents look to, and they like to talk about it. And every Sunday after school, I send home a weekly email to the parents, like a little newsletter. Religious School this week was brought to you by letter, whatever, and these words. And I try to make funny catchways where they can use it at home. So if it was Bet and Boker Tov, I say tomorrow morning, try waking your kids up saying Boker Tov or whatever it is, where they can fit it in at home somehow so the kids hear it again, more than just at school. In our community, we end school with a closing circle as a school community. So at closing circle, I ask the kids who remembers what the letter of the day was or word of the week, and I give out little candy or prizes for the kids that can remember. So they all want to remember what it was because they want to get the little prizes or whatever. And then I also post our little newsletter. We have a school Facebook page, so I post it there for the parents that don't read my emails, because a lot of them probably don't. And then at the beginning of the year, we have a religious school back to school night. So I explained what we were doing and our whole program and how Jewish life vocabulary played into that. And I also wrote a bulletin article at the beginning of the year and again mid-year about where we started at the beginning of the year and where we are right now and what the kids have been learning. Again, it's about building that positive connection to Hebrew, and the more communication we have with the parents and the more they can ask their kids about it, the better off we all are. In addition, it's larger than just what we're doing in school. Getting my clergy on board has been a big piece of this. And I think Ashley mentioned this, that she didn't just pick the words and it wasn't just her dictating this is what we're doing. It's a team effort. And so getting clergy on board from the beginning, that this isn't just a fun thing we're going to do in school and like that's what it is. It's changing the culture of our school and our synagogue, and we want our clergy to be a part of that. So I talked to my clergy. I did a lot of clergy education about this process and what Onward Hebrew is, and presented it to them and got them on board with what we're doing. I've made them a big part of all the decisions, and I send them the email every week that I send to my teachers about the words and the letters and the words, so that they know what the words are each week. That my clergy help lead services in religious schools, so they know what the letters and words are so that they can then incorporate it into tefillah on Sundays in a fun little way, whatever they want, but they're playing their part in this process. They did help me in choosing the words that are appropriate that make sense for our synagogue and our school. And then I have a fun rabbi and cantor. They just pop into the classroom and they like to use some of the words with the kids and just be funny and things like that. But so the kids know that they're on board and it's part of who we are.
Great. I love some of the things that you shared that built on what we have already heard about not only sharing at home with the parents, but actually giving them ways that they could use the words and reinforce them throughout the week. It not only helps them learn the Hebrew, but maybe helps them learn the right context in terms of saying Boker Tov or whatever sentence you're giving them or suggestion. We talked a little bit about, some people asked about how do you help kids remember to use the words and reinforce them. So a couple of mentions of prizes or stickers or paper clips, any of these kind of systems. They seem a little silly, but they really do work and go a long way towards motivation. And the fact that your clergy is on board enough to, on their own, use the words when they're seeing the kids and when they're going in the classroom is really helpful in completing that whole spirit of it's a team learning and an effort for the Jewish life vocabulary. And I also appreciate you sharing that Jewish life vocabulary in its ideal is one piece of the whole Onward Hebrew system. It's one part of Hebrew through movement and tefillah, and that the words are very often being used from week to week in different locations. Jewish life vocabulary is a great way to start Onward Hebrew, to start sound to print learning if you're looking at where to start in this journey. But it is one piece of it, and the words do get reinforced throughout the different components if you're using multiple components of Onward Hebrew. So before we turn to the questions, I just thought I would share with everybody, we've mentioned the Onward Hebrew website a couple of times. And so I'm going to share my screen so that you can just see the website and see where some of the resources are. So hopefully you are now looking at the Onward Hebrew website. It's onwardhebrew.org, and it shares a little bit about the conversation as well as the link to our Facebook group, which has a lot of active content. At the top, if you go to resources, you have a tremendous amount of resources, an overview of Onward Hebrew and sound to print learning, which I've referenced a couple of times, as well as the individual components. And I will also point out to you the Voices of Experimentation are recordings of presentations like this. So if you go into Jewish life vocabulary, there is a summary, but then there's a lot of different information. There's a Hebrew Infusion article if your partners like to learn more and have some more research behind them. A couple of general lists and icons, and as always, the Jewish Educational Center Cleveland has provided us with a ton of resources for teachers and different word lists. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was able to see that. So the first question is about using Jewish life vocabulary in tefillah. So I'm going to ask if either of our presenters or if anyone on the call wants to share anything about using Jewish life vocabulary in tefillah.
So I will share in the most respectful way to my amazing team possible. When I am the one leading tefillah, Jewish life vocabulary and our word always gets mentioned. And sometimes when I'm not the one leading tefillah, it doesn't get the enforcement that I would love as the driver of this initiative. And I think with it being our first year, like, I am optimistic that the more we continue to do it, the more people will get into that habit of remembering to mention it. I probably could be doing a better job also reminding my partners.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can.
Yes.
Hold on one second, Randee. Ashley's just going to finish answering this question, and then we'll come back.
So
Okay.
I was just saying, I certainly could be doing a better job reminding my partners to be mentioning it. And but one thing that I am proud of in terms of mentioning it in tefillah is I think sometimes there's like a really natural fit between a song we might not sing during tefillah and one of our words, or a song that maybe our music specialist could be introducing that week or for the next few weeks, and one of our Jewish life vocabulary phrases. So that's my experience with tefillah.
So I don't lead our tefillah services, but our music teacher who does lead them on Sunday mornings, I believe, I'm not always in there, but I believe most of the time he's also, going through it a little bit, not doing anything big, but at least, reintroducing it, reminding the kids of what the word is or the phrase is that week.
So I'm Miriam Phillips. I'm in Congregation Beth Am in Los Altos Hills, California. And we also have jumped full throttle into Onward Hebrew this year. We have two different tefillot, one on Wednesdays as part of our Hebrew program, and one on Sunday that's part of all the programs on Sunday. And the one on Wednesday, which is smaller, we always incorporate the Jewish life vocabulary that's being used, that unit. So we don't do by week, but we do by unit. In either the learning about a prayer or a discussion question. So we've modified Saul Kaiserman's day school tefillah curriculum, and so it kind of is easy to introduce a phrase or a word or a concept using a question. And sometimes it's in tefillah, particularly if it's prayer related or in a prayer, one of our vocabulary, but it's not consistent on the Sunday tefillah.
So I will also share in our setting, we start with tefillah, and it very much is like the way that we do announcements. We share our word of the week, and then our rabbi does like to do some reflection on this word. But I also know, similar to what other people shared, whether it's in Hebrew through movement or whether it is in the individual prayer learning that kids are doing, whenever a word comes up that we have already used, our teachers are right to say to the kids, oh, remember this word, do you remember what it means, and things like that. And there's also in the chat some conversation about the role of madrassim and how this can be something really great to give to madrassim to empower them to lead skits or introduce the Hebrew words and vocabulary as well. There were a couple questions about lists of words. So people have chosen their list based on different congregational goals. But does anyone want to share if you've been using Jewish life vocabulary for more than 1 year, or if you're thinking already about next year about using the same word list or rotating your words?
I'm actually thinking about using the exact same list of words, because the purpose is for them to hear the words over and over again so that it sticks in their head. And I think that's part of the purpose of like these words. And if they, like for us, they're hearing it once a week, and then the next week they're hearing a different word. So for us, we're not drilling it into their head, and I don't know how much of these words are sticking, and it's not really the purpose is for them to like learn it and being tested on it. So like half the stuff is sticking, half the stuff is not. So maybe by the time we get to decoding 5 years later, if they hear the same words for 5 years, then most of them may have stuck.
I'm planning on using probably like a 3-year rotation. So for the next 2 years, I'll do different lists. And then after that, probably start repeating a little bit. I just don't want it to lose its sort of freshness. And I think that I don't want the teachers to feel bored with using the same words again. And I don't want the kids, especially the students who already recognized some of these words before, I don't want them to feel bored with it. So I think we're going to do about a 3-year rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I think my first step will be the same steps I took this year, which is looking at the calendar and looking at what's a natural fit for that week. But given that we have the same number of Sundays next year as we did this year, I imagine we will use the same words, maybe a tweak here or there.
People similarly are asking questions about retention and how often you translate the words. And I think some of that has to do with what the words are and whether or not we think that members of our community have come into contact with these words in other places. So things like Boker Tov, for instance, or Yom Haledet Sameach, maybe if you have people in your community that go to camp or are in other places where they're hearing these words, your first introduction is not your students or your family's first introduction. That also speaks to if you have rotating lists, if you have kids that are coming in from year to year and they don't know those words. Some of the words that maybe are your community's first introduction or aren't translated as often. So for us, we had like Yisrael is one of our words last week, but I think a lot of people had heard Yisrael, but they didn't necessarily know what was people. So we are translating that more often, and that might be something that we would use from year to year, but something like Sameach that is used a lot and people retain a little more maybe. So I think it really depends on what the word is and how often in the rest of people's Jewish lives they might. Other questions or comments? I know there's other people on the call that have experience with Jewish life vocabulary. Anyone who wants to share something in our remaining time.
I just want to say that I know that I think everybody who gave examples said that they were doing it based on the letter of the week, and you don't have to do that. You could do that. And one of the things that Nikki, who, as I noted in the comments, has been doing Jewish life vocabulary for, I think, 5 or 6 years, she specifically does it based on a letter of the week, so that when a child in 6th grade gets to the point of learning to decode, which is when she does it, she says, so then they have 5 or 6 years of at least seeing each letter once a year as time goes on. But if you chose not to do it letter of the week, that's okay too. You can just choose words based on whatever you want to choose words on.
Often think about, though we haven't been calling it this, many of our summer camps are really experts in Jewish life vocabulary, and they rarely have a word of the week. There's usually a group of words, things like Hadarochel and Mirpa'ah, that are just used in camp in Hebrew, and they might be translated a little bit, but mostly it's that total physical response learning, right? We're going to the Hadarochel, and then when you get there, you figure out, oh, this is the place where we eat. It's how language is most naturally learned, and you could absolutely choose a group of words for the year that everybody was working on saying exclusively in Hebrew, and trying to do it that way. Last year I had classroom words, and I had a poster with Kiparon and Pach and different things that were always used in the classroom, and the idea was that the kids were only supposed to use those words in Hebrew, and there were only about 10 words that would be used for the year. Thank you, Nahama, for.
So I think you can do a combo of both. Like in our school, like there are certain words, and they're popular words that like we're starting to say only in Hebrew, like take out your Siddur, like in the sanctuary. It's not one of our Jewish life vocabulary words per se of the week, but like instead of take out your prayer book, like open your Siddur to page whatever. And we have like a snack sales bar. So we've taught all the kids, like when they're buying their snack, to say Todah Rabbah, like after you get your snack, or like things like that. That is changing the culture of like the small words that you say. You can do it. I think in our school, I think we're kind of doing a combination of those two things. Like we have our official words of the week or whatever, but there's certain like words that are in the air that like we're kind of just saying. Our teachers are just like always like saying things like that. And they say Boker Tov to the kids in the morning when they come to class. Not our word of the week, but they're hearing it every week when they come in.
That kind of positive and continual reinforcement really goes a long way. It's also a great way when you're trying to catch your kids being good to really highlight how they're using the Hebrew and to highlight how your teachers are using Hebrew. I can say, and I've heard from many other education directors, that this has been something that they've introduced that their teachers have just been really excited to do. And I found in my years that is not always the case, but the teachers really want to teach Hebrew, even those that are not native speakers, and that they have just jumped in and been really creative about it. So I just really want to thank all of our presenters, as well as our sponsoring agencies. I always want to thank Nahama and the Jewish Educational Center of Cleveland for this thought-provoking work. Those of us who are part of the Onward Hebrew leadership team are really committed to trying to help people learn more about this and to help people figure out there's no single recipe and single way forward. There's lots of ways to play and experiment under this big umbrella theory of sound to print learning. And if you've not ever reached out to Nahama, which I would find hard to believe. She is incredibly helpful and always really eager to share, as are the other members of our leadership team. I want to also again thank the builders of Jewish education, Reshet-LA, and the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles for spearheading this work, and these incredible LA colleagues who have really taught us a lot this year. If you're not on the Facebook page, or you are and you're doing some of this stuff, please just jump on, share what you're doing. Thank you, everybody, and thank you our presenters as well for your time.